I told myself as we were leaving the city of Mosul, I looked back into myself. I said, I may not ever see Mosul again, because I said, I'm not going back to that situation with that government and that political pressure. And we got to the States, went to visit my grandmother who lived in Bozeman, Montana, years later. Got there the next day, I walked over to the university, knocked on the door of the admissions office and said, can I enroll? Can I attend? And they said, where are you from? I said, well, my father and mother both went here, and I'm from Iraq. I have a year left of high school, but I'm great at math. I'm great at physics. I'm good, and I think I could make it if you let me. Dropped out of high school, never graduated from high school, got into college and got an engineering degree.
Welcome to the Pioneers of Possibility podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal, and I'm really deeply honored to share the presence today with Majid Alsayegh. Welcome to the podcast.
Good to be with you, Kareem.
Majid, you have such a wonderful family story and history. So let's talk about your parents, how they met, and where you grew up.
So in some ways, it was an odd upbringing. My father was born and grew up in Iraq, in the city of Mosul, Iraq. He studied in Egypt first for his undergraduate, went back to Baghdad.
What was his degree?
In agricultural engineering.
Okay.
Went to Baghdad, worked in a ministry for a couple of years. The U.S. Embassy was inviting young professionals to meet at various events, and they were impressed with him. And they invited him to spend a year in the United States studying whatever he wanted to study. So he asked for advice and said he wanted to study agriculture. And they said, well, Montana State University has a strong agricultural program. So that's where he went for a year. And this was in the 1950s, 1954. My mother, American, white, Christian mother, grew up on a ranch in North Dakota, a ranch that had 1,200 acres, cattle, sheep. And she grew up, a very simple upbringing. When she was young, they didn't have electricity in the home. So they didn't get a radio till she was like 12.
Till she was 12.
In their home. And that was a new thing that the neighbors had never seen. But she and her sister went to Montana State University to college. And she was there when she met my father and fell in love. They ended up marrying, much to the concern of my mother's Pentecostal Christian family. And they moved back to Mosul, Iraq, because his year was up. And I was born there.
And how was your father's family reaction to this American Christian woman coming back with him? It
was mixed, from what I understand. My grandmother very much loved my mother and embraced her. But there were you may be familiar with this, but in the Arab and Muslim world, typically marriages are arranged.
Yes.
And my father was a young, promising professional, one of the first few thousand in the country to get a college degree. And there were many mothers who had daughters who they thought would be a good fit for him, and had already had those discussions with my grandmother. And so for him to bring back a bride from the U.S. who was not an Arab, not a Muslim, not an Iraqi, was created a little bit of unhappiness amongst the community.
I actually can appreciate the story, as my mother was Swedish and my father was from India, and a bit of a similar experience. To both of them.
But my mother adapted. She learned Arabic quickly. She was young.
She learned Arabic. That's
wonderful. Yes. She's in her early 20s. She was, picked up Mosul, might call it Maslawi Arabic. And, initially they lived with my grandparents. But then they got their own home and were there for a couple of years before they decided it would be good if my father finished a graduate degree. So they picked up and moved back to Bozeman, Montana, when I was a young 2-year-old, and he finished his graduate degree there at Montana State. He then applied to a number of places, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture gave him a good job as a research scientist, as a soil scientist, and they relocated the family to South Dakota, to a small town in South Dakota in the Black Hills, South Dakota. And that's where I attended kindergarten through 5th grade. And in some ways, it was an amazing time. We were in a beautiful part of the state in terms of the mountains, the trees, the nature. But it was also a challenging time, given that we lived in a small town. I had a foreign father with an accent who didn't understand baseball, didn't understand, the sports, the culture. I had a strange name. So I was, as a child bullied there by older kids who thought that was, interesting to point out this kid with the strange name. So it was something I dealt with without, and I, as a child, I never really told my parents. I just dealt with it, but it was not easy. But then, when I was after 5th grade, my father received a call from the University of Mosul, interim president who was asked to found the university essentially. And he said, "We need you back in Iraq. You need to help us build this university that we're trying to open in Mosul." And so my father felt called. He felt that was important to him, and sold the house, packed up, and we moved back to Mosul, Iraq.
And then you spent from that time through up to college, back
college,
in Iraq.
In Iraq, and the Arabic school. So it took about 1.5 years or 2 to kind of, my Arabic speaking came back very quickly to me within a few months.
So here you were speaking English in the house.
Primarily.
You were speaking English.
Yeah. Although Arabic was the first language I learned as a
child, yes.
Yeah. But I had tutors, and my brother and sister and I had tutors. We enrolled in a private school, but for 1 year, and had tutors to help us learn to read and write and learn history and learn Islamic studies and those things, so that we could actually start our studies in the public schools again, which is what we did. But I lost a couple of years there making that transition.
How is it socially, right? So you spend a lot of your childhood.
So compare that to the United States as well. Yeah. Well, here I am, the half Arab with an Iraqi name, large extended family. I had 55 first cousins in Mosul.
55 first cousins. So your parents have very large families.
Very, very large families. But in school, again, here I'm the kid who is a little bit different, looks a little different, American mother, and I was bullied again. So I was bullied in the U.S. and bullied. So I was never fully accepted as fully Iraqi, fully Muslim, fully Arab, and yet in America, never really accepted as fully American either. So that was part of kind of what shaped me.
From my own experience and having been bullied as a child, those are, it's pretty traumatizing, right? Yeah. So, and, even when I look back at my own experience, that propels me, right? So, and you said this, tell me about that.
So there are, and I want to qualify that in that I had some wonderful friends and wonderful family. I mean, the extended family. We would gather in my uncle's house every Thursday evening, the weekend being Thursday, Friday, every Thursday evening. And there'd be 30, 40, 50 of the family members and friends there every Thursday evening. Every Friday morning, my father would have Majlis, an open house. And the professionals would come in, the lifetime friends would come in, and, in one corner they'd be playing chess or backgammon, and the other corner talking politics, and the other corner talking culture. And that was a weekly thing in our home.
So Majlis, can you explain to our listeners that concept in the Arab world?
So it's kind of a custom of having an open house that welcomes your community to come in, have a cup of coffee, have a cup of tea, bring their concerns if they have them, if they need help, to come and ask for help, or to just come and share some community time. And so, having that in my upbringing was a wonderful thing.
That's great. So at 19, you decided to come back to the U.S. for university.
Well, it sort of. Okay. In 1968, I was 12, maybe almost 13. The Ba'ath Party took over in Iraq.
Okay.
Saddam Hussein was vice president, and it quickly became a brutal dictatorship. It went from kind of a benign government that people pretty much was able to come and go, travel, do as they please, to a government that appropriated businesses, took away properties, started spying on everyone in the workplace, universities, schools. And within a few years, I was feeling it, especially in high school, that I'm being watched and I'm not trusted, that I've got to, curtail anything I say, certainly nothing critical about anybody or anything.
How did that manifest itself?
So my father was not political. I mean, he was very much about, trying to serve his community and country. And he was, helping build the university and teach, not because it was a job, but because he cared. And he thought, and his peers like him who were dedicated, they thought these are a bunch of thugs who are appointing people with no education who are not qualified. And they're causing harm to this country. But he stayed out of it. He was not involved. And the Baathification, the indoctrination was coming into the school system, and every school had its political leaders, and they were trying to recruit, and they would recruit not just members, but members to spy on others, and that's something I would not have a part of. And in my last 6 months there, I was starting to be cornered and being told, if you're not willing to join our party, you must be a member of another party. What party is that? And starting to get aggressive. So I was starting to actually fear. In high school, there were friends that disappeared because their family was critical of the party, and we knew they were no longer living. So a very high element of fear at that time in my life. My mother decided it was time for her to make a visit back to the United States to visit her family, and she had not been back in about 9 or 10 years. So my sister and I went with her. And this was after my 11th grade. So I had 1 year of high school left, but I was 19. I told myself, as we were leaving the city of Mosul, I looked back, and to myself, I said, I may not ever see Mosul again, because I said, I'm not going back to that situation with that government and that political pressure. And we got to the States, went to visit my grandmother who lived in Bozeman, Montana, years later. Got there the next day, I walked over to the university, knocked on the door of the admissions office and said, can I enroll? Can I attend? And they said, where are you from? I said, well, my father and mother both went here, and I'm from Iraq. I have a year left of high school, but I'm great at math. I'm great at physics. I'm good, and I think I could make it if you let me just try, as an engineering student. Let me try. And they kind of chuckled and they said, well, no, you go back to Iraq, finish your senior year and apply, and you're in. But we can't let you in like this. Just so
can't show up, knock on the door, and
can't
receive admission.
They kind of smiled. And so I walked back to my grandmother's house, and the following week we went to South Dakota to visit friends who we had known years ago. And my uncle had gone to the South Dakota School of Mines, engineering school in Rapid City, South Dakota. So I did the same thing. Walked over there, went to, but at this time I had a little bit of a better.
You massage your speech.
Yeah. And I said, listen, would you be willing to test me? Give me a test, see if I score well enough, would you let me in as a provisional student? I gave him the background, and the admissions dean said, you know what? Why don't you come back tomorrow? We'll give you a test. So I came back the next day, and he gave me an ACT test, and he said, we'll call you.
They had ACT tests, yeah.
Call you tomorrow. So he called me the next day. He said, you scored better than 80% of the engineering students that we had met, so you're in.
There you go.
Yeah. So that was how I dropped out of high school, never graduated from high school, got into college, and got an engineering degree.
For listeners today, they can't imagine that, right?
And
SAT, they need the diploma, they need transcript from their high schools.
I didn't have the money. I had to get some money from my grandmother, who was kind enough to kind of pay the tuition bill and the room and board for a semester. And then I sent a telegram to my father. I said, Dad, I wanted to at least try it for a week before I told him, because there's no email, there's no way to call. And I sent him a telegram. And I said, Dad, I enrolled at the South Dakota School of Mines. I'm an engineering student now, and I'm not coming home. And he telegrammed back, you're making a major mistake, son. This will always be on your record that you never finished high school, and you'll never get a job without a high school degree as well. Because in Iraq, they look for that. They look high school degree, everything. And he said, this is a major mistake. You should have finished college in University of Mosul and then go anywhere you want to go. I'd support you. I said, Dad, I've made my decision. And so that's how I enrolled in college.
You had a few engineering jobs.
Yes.
And you ended up in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah. So I'd go to the library and read about different companies in the job market. And at the top of the list almost every year was the Bechtel Corporation out of San Francisco, big engineering firm that did half their business in the Middle East and big projects in Saudi Arabia. And I thought, that's probably where I should go. So I sent them my resume by mail my senior year, and they actually sent out a HR person to interview me and 30 other people that signed up, and ended up getting a job with Bechtel and starting in San Francisco. And I told them, initially during the interview, I'd like to go to Saudi Arabia. And they said, well, we don't usually send anyone until they've had 5 years of experience.
5 years of experience here domestically.
In the U.S. before they go abroad. And I said, that's fine. And I said, and I don't want to, I really don't think I'd be very good at sitting at a design table and designing. I know my degree is in structural engineering, designing columns and footings, and I can't see myself doing that day in and day out. And they said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, I think I'd really like to pursue a path in project management, managing projects. He said, well, that's actually a good path, and we'll put you through a training program. So they, from day one, put me into a training program in the home office, rotating me through all the different departments in the main office. And then after a year, sent me out to the Limerick nuclear station, where I also rotated. It's like 3 or 4 departments to kind of pick up the project management tools and skills. And then they sent me to Saudi Arabia. And I gave me 4 projects to manage there in Saudi Arabia. And it was the Jubail Industrial Project was the biggest project in the history of humankind, $50 billion budget. And there were 2,000 engineers managing these projects. I had 4 projects that were $20 to $30 million each. Small projects, but they were great opportunity for me to kind of practice my project management skills.
Jubail, for our listeners, is just a massive industrial.
So it was a
petrochemical refining complex.
Well, it was a small fishing village
at that time
with mud huts on the Persian Gulf, or the Arabian Gulf, as some might say. They took about 400 square miles just north of the fishing village and turned it into this huge industrial, complex with housing, hospitals, schools. So when I left in 1987, there was about 70,000 people living there, whereas just 7 or 8 years before, there was nobody.
And then, so after that time in Saudi, you came back to the U.S.?
I came back to the U.S., studied at the University of Pennsylvania. They had a Center for Energy and the Environment.
Okay.
And I thought, okay, I've done all this energy-related work, and I'm interested in the environment. I think I'm going to enroll there in a graduate program. And I was accepted. Did well there. Did all the coursework for a PhD. And got, one of the professors who happened to be Jewish, Dr. Mark Bernstein. He said, Majid, you've got all this experience, and I've got people I know in the World Bank and other places. Do you want to work together? We could, so we formed a 50-50 consulting partnership. And we did studies for the World Bank. We did it for electric utilities. We did a number of things for 3 or 4 years. And then he went to work for the Clinton administration. And I went out on my own, continued to do consulting. Did some smaller projects, but then Ed Rendell was elected mayor of Philadelphia. And they were having some major problems with getting a courthouse built. And here again, this couple I had come to know in Philadelphia, they were Iraqi Jews. They were a Jewish couple that had fled Iraq, come to Philadelphia and built a life there. And I had met them through the University of Pennsylvania. And they were just so pleased to see me. And the fact that, I fled Iraq roughly 25 years after they did. But we all loved our childhood there, our formative years. And even though they were Jewish and, I come from a Muslim family, we became really good friends. They are the ones that introduced me to someone in the Rendell administration who said, let's see what Majid has to say about this hole in the ground that we have that our engineers can't seem to get going. And so we ended up taking over the project and getting the Criminal Justice Center, which is down across from City Hall, getting it built, $30 million under budget. And the budget director's name was Mike Mash at the time. He called me in. I thought, yes, Mike. He said, well, I just wanted to thank you. And I want you to know that this has never happened before in the history of Philadelphia. Project coming in this way under budget. What do you want to do now? So that was like the beginning of a great partnership with the Rendell administration. And we managed design and construction of the Judicial Center in Harrisburg, the Supreme Court, the Penguins Arena in Pittsburgh, and for other clients as well. I mean, we deprivatized the for-profit prison in Delaware County a few years ago. So we've done a lot of complicated, tough projects over the past 30 plus years, and I've been blessed to be part of that.
And that consulting business continues today.
Continues. We're actually assisting. I've got a team of 3 working with the city of Philadelphia again. Their prison system was found to be out of compliance by a federal judge a year and a half ago, and the city was fined $25 million.
So I'd like to step back just a little bit, in the period since you had left, Iran, Iraq had the war, and there was the Gulf War.
Yeah.
How did your family cope with that?
Kareem, that's actually a kind of a thread that's run through my life, right? Is that I've been there's been war and conflict going on most of my life, and a good part of it between my country of birth and my country of citizenship currently, right? So during the Iraq-Iran war, at that point, my father was pleased I wasn't in Iraq because most of my cousins were called up to serve in the military.
Oh my goodness!
And we lost 5 members of the family in that war. One of my cousins, by the name of Adil was an officer, like a colonel in the army, and he was captured in like 1982 by the Iranians, and he was kept as a prisoner of war until that entire 21 years or whatever, 20 years. He was a prisoner of war, and so many people suffered that way because of a stupid, needless war where 2 people with big egos were not willing to stop the death and destruction. And when I was at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm in this program, and there was an Iranian PhD student, and right away he's treating me like the enemy, And so that was one of the things I did there was I said, Nader, our cousins might be shooting each other, but you and I can get along. So that was kind of one of the first attempts at bridge building that I did was with an Iranian who, during when the Iraq-Iran war was happening.
You have really a rich history of bridge building, interfaith work. Yeah. Talk to us about that.
So I think being the other, whether I was living in America or in Iraq, was something that kind of helped me understand the need to build those bridges. And I've been fortunate to meet people that have kind of assisted me in finding a way to do that work. In 1998, I went to a concert performance in Philadelphia, and it was Udi Bar-David, this Israeli cellist in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and Simone Shaheen, a Palestinian violinist. And I heard them perform, and I thought, how cool is that? Why can't we have more of that and less of the fighting? And so I gave my card to both of them, and a few days later, Udi calls me and said, "Can we meet for coffee?" And I met for coffee and talked like we are now, and backgrounds, and he said, "I'd love to work with you on kind of scheduling more of these kind of events, but I want you to meet one of my friends, Carol Haas-Gravano is the vice chair of the board of the orchestra and a philanthropist, and she's supporting some of this work." So we met with Carol, and long story short, fourth friend, Shell Thompson, joined us, and we ended up kind of becoming the working group for this organization we called Intercultural Journeys. We were doing 5, 6, 7 events a year, and then we incorporated and turned it into a nonprofit in 2002, and started doing more events and expanding beyond just Muslim Jewish to include other, ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds. And that's still an amazing nonprofit. The young people who are now running it changed the name to Journey Arts because they thought Intercultural Journeys was a little bit of a mouthful and not hip. So they changed it to Journey Arts with our blessing. I didn't want to over control these things even though we were part of the beginning.
Simple name that gets to the heart of the matter.
Yeah,
it's the best possible thing.
And it said, Intercultural Journeys. People don't know what we do.
Yeah,
Journey Arts. It tells people.
They could tell.
I said I'm on board. So yeah. That's what it's called now, and they're doing amazing work. I joined the board of the Dialogue Institute in Philadelphia 16 or 17 years ago, and just became really immersed in learning dialogue skills and supporting the organization and doing the dialogue training and leadership training that they do. And it's helped me learn how to be a better bridge builder. And through that, I've met a number of leaders nationally and internationally. I was asked to meet with a group of Muslim and Jewish leaders in Washington, D.C. Back in 2016. They were talking about founding the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, and it ended up being a group of 40 Muslim and Jewish leaders that are national leaders, and co-chaired by 2 CEOs, business CEOs, Stanley Bergman and Farouk Kathwari. Parallel to that, I was kind of helping create a circle of friends in Philadelphia. Started independently of the Muslim Jewish Advisory Council, but then we folded it in as a chapter of the Muslim Jewish Council. And I've been involved with that group for the past 9 years.
How many chapters are there of the council?
There were 7 or 8. I mean, a group of us went to Detroit to start a chapter, to San Francisco to join us, and Dallas, Washington, D.C., and New York. October 7th happened. Well, before I talk about October 7th, I should say that we focused on matters that impact our communities rather than on the Middle East conflict. And we agreed that one of the most significant problems was the increase in hate crimes against Muslims in America and against Jews. So we put together a task force of Muslim and Jewish leaders that went to Capitol Hill, and we knocked on the doors of, 30 different senators, 40 different members of Congress, and said, we want your support to draft a hate crime bill that protects religious communities. And one of our Muslim leaders, Arsalan Suleiman, was Obama's ambassador to the Organization of Islamic States. And Arsalan is a Harvard Law grad, smart guy. He actually drafted the bill that we gave to Congress and the Senate, and back and forth worked it through. And once it was approved by the Senate Justice Committee, Orrin Hatch worked with us to get it to President Trump at the time and got him to sign it. He didn't fully understand that there were Muslims behind this, as well as Jews. We kept that pretty much.
Keep that in the background.
That was below, in the background, right? But he signed it into law, and it's been and then subsequent to that, we worked on the Heather Heyer Jabara Act, which was another second hate crime law. Heather Heyer was the woman who was killed by a car driver in Virginia, Charleston.
In Charlottesville.
Yeah. Right. And the Jabara family, a couple were murdered in Oklahoma because they were of Arab descent. And so it was called the Heyer Jabara Act. And in 2021, we got that signed into law.
You work at the council. October 7th happens. And there's lots of tensions between the communities.
It was a tough time. And we had ironically been scheduled to meet in Washington, D.C. like the week after October 7th. It'd been scheduled for a few months. And October 7th happened, and all of a sudden, some of the Jewish members, some of the Muslim members are like, I don't know, this is not a good time to meet. But some of us showed up, not everybody. And it was a kind of a brutally honest, open discussion, but respectful, and a lot of sharing of pain, and a lot of, but a respectful meeting. And those that were there, I think, look back and say that was really good that we did that. But kind of the overall consensus was, it's going to be very hard to do this work, given the hostages and given that the bombing of Gaza going on, and we have our communities that are suffering a lot of pain. And how can we do this work and not address what's going on with our communities? So some of the members stepped back and said, and the organization as a whole said, okay, let's put our efforts on hold officially. But those who want to work together on various things, that's your call. So I was one of the ones that continued to be engaged in some fashion. One of the first things I was asked to do was to go to the Jewish Museum in New York. They have 100 employees, and there were tensions between the young 20-something employees and the older employees in terms of criticism of Israel versus defending Israel for its actions. And
so in that sense, the younger ones were critical, and the older ones defend at all costs.
Calling, what the government of Israel is doing, genocide, and the other ones were defending. And I went with the director of the Muslim Jewish Council, Dr. Ari Gordon, and he asked me if I would go with him, the Jewish Muslim guy, to talk to this 100 members of staff. And we met with them for about 2.5, 3 hours. And kind of the approach we took was in part dialogue skills, but also explaining the harm that's done by using words that trigger anxiety, pain, alienation. And if you want to have a work environment that's able to achieve its mission, you want to be careful about what words you bring into that environment. And not that people shouldn't be able to stand up for the principles they believe in, absolutely. But when you have a work environment, you've got to put the mission of the work first and not bring your own personal issues into that environment. Everybody thought it was a good, helpful exercise, and then that led to many others after that. I was invited to be part of a meeting at the Chamber of Commerce in Washington, D.C. with senior executives from 50 corporations, Amazon, Google. We spent a full day talking about the tensions they were having in their organizations and how to address those. And we took kind of what we talked about with the Jewish Museum and kind of, refashioned it a little bit, but also offered that to the Chamber of Commerce folks.
That has evolved. So you recently just got back from the Vatican.
Yes. Well, and before that, I should mention that University of Pennsylvania had an encampment, protesters, and I was called by the mayor's office, and the mayor's office in Philadelphia said, would you be willing to mediate in this very difficult situation between the students and the president's office? And I said, of course, if I can be helpful, I'd certainly want to. And immediately I got a call from the president's office. We had a 90-minute Zoom, and they wanted to know how I would approach it, how I would handle it. I talked about the dialogue skills and the Dialogue Institute and the dialogue approach and how important it is to listen. And they shared with me the asks of the students, and I reached out to the students, did not get a response back. Reached out through the chaplain, did not get a response back. Reached out through Senator Nikhil Saval, who's a good friend and colleague, and he actually was able to get them to be willing to talk to me. And that was the day that the Penn decided, to take the encampment down. So I never did actually.
You were never able to actually negotiate. Mediate.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah. The president at Penn said, we're going to keep you on speed dial, were his exact words. And a few months later, they called and said, we want to create an Office of Religious and Ethnic Interests. Would you be co-director with a Jewish guy? I said, well, that sounds familiar. and so September 1 of 2024, I joined Steve Ginsburg and we've been co-directors of this office, and really building it around education, mediation, when there's something really serious, investigation. But 95 out of 100 times in the past 15 months, it's been a discussion where we help people understand either the words they use or the actions they took didn't contribute to a healthy learning environment, and we would encourage them to not do that. Not that they shouldn't stand up for their principles or even speak out, but speak out in ways that don't demonize an entire group of people, that don't demonize all Palestinians, that don't demonize all Israelis, that don't demonize all Jews, that don't demonize all Republicans, that don't demonize all Democrats. That is a problem when someone is dehumanizing a group of people, regardless of who the group of people are.
And with tension so high, how has that been received by the student body primarily?
It's been received well by, again, a majority of students, faculty, and staff, and in part, people want to understand how they can speak up on behalf of a cause they believe in without crossing the line and being seen as dehumanizing or demonizing. And so that's the education part of it. Now, there is also, we live in a time when the federal government is monitoring these things, at anything that might contribute to an environment that's hostile to learning. And so we have to really address and talk to any complaint that comes up. And that has created anxiety, I think, on the part of some faculty and some students. They feel that it's chilling speech. And we don't want people to feel that. We don't, so that's been part of the educational process is, look, we're not here to chill speech, but we're here to encourage people to speak and to act in ways that contribute to educating others about your position without getting into battling, warring, demonizing.
That's the challenge of our time, right?
It is a challenge.
So the temperature is high, emotions are high, and whether it's here or whether it's somewhere else in the world, this challenge is certainly the ability to listen. Right? The ability to listen to your counterpart, and that's almost a podcast for another time.
So Rome.
So
about a month ago or 6 weeks ago, I had lunch with a faculty member at Penn, and he said, there's this program that's going to happen in Rome, and it's Scholas, this organization founded by Pope Francis like 12, 14 years ago that teaches in leadership and dialogue. Sounds like what you do at the Dialogue Institute, but they're doing it. They started in Argentina. They're doing it in the Vatican with young people, and they're going to bring 42 students from Hebrew University, Tel Aviv University, Georgetown University, Israelis, Palestinians, Americans. They're going to bring them together for a week in Rome to teach them dialogue skills and teach them leadership and teach them how to work across this incredibly challenging conflict at an incredibly tough time. This is what I live for. And so I joined them, and it was amazing to see the quality of students and they're self-selective. I mean, obviously when they see something like this advertised, you're going to get students that are actually interested in bridge building, interested in dialogue. I think even choosing to try to talk about the war, even before October 7th, this would have been tough. Since then, it just is multiple times tougher in that, you had Israeli students, some who had served in the IDF, who, their best friends had been hostages. You had Palestinian youth who had lost family members in Gaza and knew dozens and dozens and dozens of people who died and were killed in the bombing of Gaza. So for them to be able to come together and to talk about these things.
At the end of the week, how did people part?
So, there's a lot of sharing of experiences, but then there was a shift that said, okay, well, I get emotional.
Being able to go there and experience that and trying to be the glue that bring people together when circumstance and is trying to tear people apart is something that you've spent your life working on.
I want to give a lot of credit to Skolas and to the other leaders. But they went right there to the toughest part, and they did exercises like took headlines of the major newspapers that talked about tens of thousands being bombed in Gaza, and gave people a blank sheet of paper. What is that? What do you feel from that? And then news headlines about the hostages and some of the bad things that happened to them. How do you feel about that? And they collect the comments for everybody anonymously and then passed them out and had them read them to each other. A very powerful way of letting everybody kind of be open and honest about it. And we did a lot of small group work. And this is where it really got productive, where we said, okay, let's assume ceasefire holds, and we're able to set the stage for peace negotiations. What are the first steps? Building trust. How do you build trust after what's happened? Who will meet to negotiate? We want you to break up into small groups. Problem solve that.
Probably should be them.
At
the end.
Very impressed with them. Very impressed. They were very thoughtful in their responses. In an ideal world, what is the outcome? What does it look like? Is it a two-state solution? Is it a one-state solution? Is it a confederation? Is it with Jordan, with Israel, with what is it? What do you think? And the groups are
using
mixed.
Basically a white paper.
Yeah, and the
develop
groups
your solution.
You'd have 7 individuals. 2 or 3 might be Israeli, 2 or 3 might be Palestinian Christian, 2 or 3 might be Palestinian Muslim. There was a Druze there. These are diverse kids, all in a diverse group of like 7 each, with a facilitator saying, okay, this group think this. And that group needs to come up with one proposal, not Israelis against Palestinians, but Israelis and Palestinians coming up, and Americans were part of it from Georgetown, come up with one proposal. What do you think? What do you think would work best in terms of an ideal outcome? And then after that, the next step was, okay, we don't live in an ideal world. And for one, the Palestinians don't have the power to have an ideal, outcome. What is realistic to expect, given what we know about the players in terms of an outcome, and what came out of the consensus of the group of that exercise was probably some form of a two-state solution where there's a Palestinian interim state with international help and for a number of years, many years. But eventually, both the Israelis and the Palestinians felt the ideal would be to have one state with equality and rights for all. Now, what was shared by kind of uniformly across the group was the lack of confidence in their leadership, whether you're talking Israelis or Palestinians. They're just very upset with their leaders, very unhappy with what has happened, the years that have gone by. The Israelis and Palestinians understand that the educational system that they grew up with is harmful to their future ability to actually build shared society, and that needs to be fixed. Some of the Israeli students said they should be learning Arabic. 1 out of 5 Israeli citizens are Arab speaking. Why aren't we learning Arabic as well as Hebrew? So it was just really special to be able to spend time with them, and then the Arabian horse part.
I wanted to finish on a really positive topic, right?
Well,
this is positive.
And the Arabian horse kind of comes in often when you don't expect it to. So
for our listeners, we're with Majid on his horse farm. And Arabian horses are a very big part of
my
life,
and it have been. And so you had asked earlier before we got on here how that happened. So my mother grew up on a horse in the ranch in North Dakota. Loved horses, and as a child, my earliest memory as a 2 or 3 year old was hearing her tell me bedtime stories about her horse on the farm. And I loved those stories and loved horses from my earliest memory, just drawn to them as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old. And my father comes from a tribe called the Mawali. The Mawali is one of the 3 Arab tribes that are most known for breeding Arabian horses for the past 1,500 years. So it's in my blood on my father's side and mother's side. So I've always just loved horses. So, and I've been on a breeder here on the farm and been a trustee of an international breeding organization. A month ago, a Polish breeding stud, which is 300 years old, literally breeding Arabian horses in Poland for 300 years. And they were used for war for many centuries, but they still breed them and they're sought after. And they gifted an Arabian horse to Pope Leo.
Okay.
A month ago. And so I saw that in the news. I thought, wow, what's the name? I checked the name. And I thought, well, let me go into the international database. I got to find out what are the bloodlines, right? And I checked the bloodlines and I thought, oh my God, that's a grandson of Haleo Ramadan, Princess Alia's favorite stallion in the royal stables of Jordan. I have been there when she took that stallion, when he won the championship at the royal stables. And she published a book. Let me show it to you.
Oh, please, that would be great.
So she published this book, The Story of Jordan's Arab Horses, Royal Heritage, Princess Alia Al Hussein and Peter Upton. And so I thought, I'm gonna take a copy. And I brought her to Kentucky to the horse show.
You brought Her Royal Highness. Yeah. Okay.
And she brought 100 of the books and then signed them for people.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And I kept several copies because I thought, you never know when I want one of these for a special occasion. So guess what I did? I took a copy to the Vatican.
To the Vatican.
And the Pope invited us. Well, his people invited us. He didn't, but his people invited us to attend his message to the faithful on St. Peter's Square Wednesday morning. And there was like 20,000 people in the square. Mm-hmm. And we were seated right up next to his platform. And after the prayers and the message to the faithful, we were told to line up, and he came and met with us.
Oh, you met the Pope?
Met the Pope. Oh, wow. Yeah. Well, but he wanted to compliment the group, the students. He told about the work we did that week, and he supports what Pope Francis had started doing with this group. And so I told the Scholas leader, who was our host, I said, I brought this book for him. He said, well, we'll make sure he gets it. I'm not sure if we can do it right here, right now, right. But we'll make sure he gets it. Give it to me. And so he handed it to the Pope's
right-hand person.
Yeah. and who handed it to the Pope. And the Pope looks at it, and
Can you whip out your cell phone, or you did?
I did. I'll show you a picture in a bit. And he got a chuckle out of it. He thought, he just thought this was great. That I took a couple pictures of him looking at the book, and immediately after getting back from the event, I WhatsApped him to Princess Alia. I said, hey, I gave your book to the Pope, and she was I thought that was terrific. But another example of bridge building between.
This is such a warm and amazing story. I have one parting question. So you're a national bridge builder. You're an international bridge builder and peacemaker in a lot of ways. What I guess really one question, 2 questions. What's the toughest thing about that? And what gives you most hope?
Well, I'm a long-term optimist, Kareem. I keep meeting people that they want to figure out how to move forward in a positive way and how to get along, and that gives me kind of the fuel I need to keep going. I'm a Muslim and in many ways embrace some of the Sufi ways of thinking, and I believe there's a spark of the divine in each of us, and if we can just let that enlighten our way forward and shine a light on how to be more compassionate, how to be more caring, and that's what life's about.
That's great. Well, Majid, really appreciate your vulnerability here. So with our guests, we really deeply honor that and respect your story and sharing with the audience. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
It's been a pleasure. This episode of The Pioneers of Possibility has been produced and edited by Danny Vagnoni, with music credits going to the artist known as Sahari, and artwork for our podcast is presented by the artist known as Layla. I'm your host, Kareem Afzal. Thank you for listening. If you like this episode and you would like to hear more from future episodes, please follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and click the subscribe button on YouTube. And please leave a comment so we can engage our listeners. Thank you very much. See you next time.